Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Britt, Kanawha, West Hancock Athletics Podcast. Dan Kroll here for episode 75. And tonight I have six Koele brothers, all six Koele brothers on with me. These six combined for 10 conference titles, 12 sectional titles in wrestling, 9 district titles, and 5 state championships on the mat for Coach DeLeon. So pretty excited to have all six of you guys on here tonight. Thanks again for doing this and making it work in your schedule. Before we get to these guys, I have 19 sponsors for tonight, so I want to make sure I recognize those guys. They're giving their money to the Sanger Legacy Fund, so I want to make sure we recognize them. I have Nick Schmidt, Levi Dunn Trucking, Miller and Son Golf Cars, Jay Hiscox of State Farm Insurance, Eric Kroll of Ag Performance, Window World of Mason City, Swenson's Hardware, the Britt Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise, Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company, First State Bank, Koele Real Estate, Triple B's Food, Sportsman's Corner in Algona, West Side Eagle Storage, Farmers Trust and Savings Bank, Katie's Salon and Tanning, Brent Hagen, Advanced Door Systems in Forest City, and Kathy and Doug Zool. Kathy and Doug just messaged me last night and said they want a long-term sponsor it. So they signed up to do 28 episodes. So thanks to the Zools and everybody else for doing this. Like always, the Sanger Legacy Fund is the recipient of this sponsorship money. We use the Sanger Legacy Fund to help fund the West Hancock Hall of Fame. We give scholarships to seniors. We support the athletic and activity funds at West Hancock and other community outreach programs that are in need. If you want to sponsor the podcast, get a hold of me or go to sangerstrong.com to give or learn more about the fund. 50 episodes ago. I'm pretty excited, guys. This is episode 75. I never thought this thing would go as long as it has. So I do a thing where I highlight an episode from 50 episodes ago. And that was the 2021 state title game. And Steve's boy Koele played in that game. We won our 4th state championship. So check that episode out. I'll have it linked on my Facebook post. Then I have to share my screen here real quick. I've been doing this every episode since I officially started selling copies. The book I've been writing for the last 2 years is called On West Hancock. It's a chapter book. It's the history of the Britt and West Hancock football and wrestling programs. I can type out the last name Koele in my sleep. I've written that name out a lot in the book. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've put about 2 years into this book. Diane Troutman's my editor, and she's putting every spare moment of her time into this book right now. $25 includes shipping. It's going to be about a 550 to 600 page book. Has have a section with pictures as well. I have about 500 copies yet to sell, so if you could order your copy now, that'd be great. I do have to kind of pay for this up front, so I am taking pre-orders to help fund the project. So if you want a book or 2 or 10, please get a hold of me on Facebook Messenger. That would be great. All right, fellas, we're going to get rolling. Thanks again for coming on. I'm excited. I've been excited for this one for a long time. 6 Koele brothers, a whole lot of success on the wrestling mat and other sports. So let's start with introductions here. I dropped my notes already. We'll start up in the top left corner and work our way around clockwise, and wherever Jeff wants to jump in, Jeff can jump in since he's in the middle. So Mark, let's start with you. Where are you at these days? What's keeping you busy? How's the family and job and all that good stuff?
Good. Yeah, my wife Morgan and I, West Hancock grad of 01. We live in Ankeny, have 5 kids. They're all in school, kindergarten up to sophomore, and I work for an insurance company.
Nice. How about you, Grace? I mean, Tim.
Yeah, I'm using my daughter's computer, so it shows her name. I'm Tim, graduated in '83, so I'm the oldest of the boys. I live in central Wisconsin. I've been in Wisconsin for about 25 years, 10 in the Milwaukee area, and then the last 15 in the Stevens Point area, which is right in central Wisconsin. I've got 4 kids. One is out of college. I've got 2 in college, and then a senior in high school.
Nice. Where do they go to college right now?
One goes to University of Wisconsin at La Crosse, and the other one of them, she graduated from University of Wisconsin's La Crosse, and then is now getting her doctorate in physical therapy from University of Wisconsin Stevens Point.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Pat, you don't really need introductions. You've done about every other podcast I've ever done, I feel like. But just in case people haven't seen those.
I'm Pat, 88 grad. Live in Topeka, Kansas. Been down here, I think 16 years, second stint in Kansas. I teach, coach. Gave up high school coaching last spring, so doing the teaching thing now, and coaching at the middle school as well. Married to Lisa for going on 29 years here. 3 kids. Youngest Ella goes to K-State. She's a sophomore. Bailey, the middle, he is in St. Louis. He teaches, graduated from Maryville University a couple years ago, math teacher. And then my son Ryan is in Lincoln, Nebraska, and he is a lawyer working in immigration.
How about Jeff? We'll jump to the middle here.
Yeah, I'm Jeff. I graduated class of 1985. After high school, went to Iowa State, graduated from Iowa State in 1990. From there, I went to Mankato, Minnesota. I was an assistant wrestling coach there at Mankato State. And then I spent 6 years in Valley City, North Dakota, at a small college up there where I was a head wrestling coach. I worked in their admissions office. And really for the last 21 years, I've been at DMAC, where I'm a site director at our Ames Hunziker Center. And really that just means I work with we have high school classes, our high school students that come into our building that take classes, mostly hands-on tech type classes. So I direct all those programs for us. I've got a 9-year-old special needs daughter, so that keeps me very busy.
Steve, go ahead.
Me and Deanna live in Britt at the home place, and 1990 grad, first class of West Hancock. And then I went to community college, and then I went to Iowa State after that, majored in ag, and then worked for about a year, and then got the opportunity to be DeLeon's assistant coach at Waldorf. That was a great experience. Was there for about until 2009, and then I've been at Nyack ever since. 4 kids. Koele is at Nyack, finishing up. He's going to go to Iowa State. And then Kennedy's at Grandview. Creighton is a sophomore in high school, and then Hagen is a 7th grader.
Last but not least, Mike.
And I am Mike. I'm an 86 grad. I am the neglected middle child. There's 4 older and 4 younger. Always have to get that plug in because mom never felt very sorry for me when I said that. I am about a month shy of 25 years at Nationwide Insurance. I'm a manager of a claim operation. I live in Ankeny with my son, Paul James Kelly II, named after dad. He is a sophomore at Ankeny High School. And then I have a son, Storm. He's in Indianola with his wife and daughter, Everly, who was born in October. So I am a grandpa. And then I've got a daughter, Rachel. She's a senior at Iowa State, will graduate here in May. And then she'll continue on with a master's program there. And then last, my daughter, Brooklyn, is a junior at Iowa State.
Thanks. All right, well, good stuff. Thanks again for coming on, guys. You mentioned Paul. I wanted to start with your guys' dad, Paul Kelly. Wrestled for Britt in the late 1940s and into the 1950 season. I put this in our notes here. He wrestled just about a dozen varsity matches. Back then in the 40s, early 50s, even into the 60s and 70s, they didn't wrestle a ton of matches like they do nowadays. Now they're wrestling 50, 60 matches a year. They were lucky to get 10 to 15, and that was including if you made it to state. So your dad was kind of on again, off again on the varsity team, what I could gather. His first match was December 12th, 1947. He lost to a guy by the last name Richardson from Algona. And then he won 5 matches total and 5 losses in his varsity career. So he was 5-5. One of his wins on January 9th, 1948 was against a guy from Des Moines, Lincoln. He pinned him in 5 minutes, 54 seconds. One, I couldn't find the results of how he won. Another one, he beat that McDole kid again, but 2 years later, 2-0. And then he beat a kid from Clarion, didn't get the name from that as well. But talk about your dad a little bit. I just gave a little wrestling background, but just in general, talk about your dad, talk about your mom, kind of your upbringing in Britt, and then start harassing each other a little bit.
I would start with saying that, his wrestling career was probably delayed quite a bit because I think they were more of a boxing family. You had some brothers that were really good at Golden Gloves boxing. And then it got to a certain point where after their fights, they'd be walking around the house without shirts on with bruises all over. And mom and dad didn't quite like the looks of that. So they kind of shut dad down from boxing. And so then he, somehow got involved in wrestling. And I think that's, probably a bit of what limited the number of matches he had. But to talk about him, I think everybody thinks this and feels the same way about their parents. That, they're the greatest thing that they could have had as parents. We every year we went on vacations. We went to church every Sunday. We sat around the living room and said the rosary every Sunday night. To our dismay, we got drug into the living room and had to do that. Very practical upbringing, especially with dad. Mom was the one that always, she wanted to stay up late. We'd be out carousing around Britt or wherever. Boy, she'd stay up late and she wanted to hear the stories. Okay, what happened tonight? Who did the funny thing or who did whatever? And she was the one that always wanted to stay up just to listen and laugh with us and kind of re-talk about the night.
That was well said, Tim, just as far as, mom and dad. And, I think as far as like, wrestling and really athletics in general, dad was really the one that kind of introduced us to the sport that, I think he loved wrestling. And even back then, I mean, my first remembrance was, guys like, the Hagens, the Howletts, Stevensons. And he would always kind of relate that, to us and getting us involved in wrestling and showing us wrestling technique. But he was also at the same time, I never felt any pressure on myself. It was, I know a lot of, kids growing up now feel a lot of pressure from their parents but with him it was more of just, try it. And just mentally for me, he really just kind of instilled that a belief in yourself that, if you don't think you can do it, you can't, and it's something that you've really got to believe in yourself. And so that was something he just really, even just mentally instilled in me as well.
Yeah, I think just dealing with sports with the two. Again, I would echo that what Fed said is we were never pushed. We were never demanding of things. We never, we got win or lose. We were never we had a workout facility, a little wrestling mat, and that Steve still has in the basement, and some weights and stuff. But it was never a thing where you lost, so they're taking you down there and drilling a mover. There was just no kind of pressure like that. And I think that both mom and dad just really like sports. I mean, mom would go to the state basketball games, state softball games every year just because she enjoyed doing it when Britt wasn't even involved in it. And with dad, just kind of a love of wrestling. Several years ago, there was an article that Koele Sanderson was quoted as saying, when he goes to state tournaments to recruit, he looks for the old guy that's filling out the bracket sheet and because that's the guy he's going to sit by because he knows everything. Well, I have several of these, and these are the state books, and I don't know if you can really see it, but every weight is filled out. All the way through the whole bracket, and we're talking not 1 year of this, not just when we were in it, but years of these brackets, and they're all filled out. So I think that's something that that I always remember. It's just that they had a genuine love of sports. It was never a chore for them to go to events and things.
Yeah, I think they just make it our own, because like you guys talk about, there was no pressure. I believe that too, because my 5 brothers did, much better than I did, but I never felt that tension from them to, they did this, so I feel like you should too. And they wanted me to make it my own. And I really appreciated that because, some people maybe feel a lot of pressure. And I never really did. And my dad is really driven too. My mom and dad both were in what they did. And I think they really helped us drive us too.
I think something that I would echo everything what everybody said. They're probably the parents too that Coach DeLeon and Coach Sanger probably appreciated the most, because just sheer numbers, not that we were better than anybody else, but just in sheer numbers, that, he didn't meddle. Neither of them meddled. They just sat back and did their thing. Mom, I think, probably stealing somebody's thunder, but I'm going to. There used to be a couple times there was three of us that wrestled on the team at the same time, and sometimes we were right in a row. And Mom, she really didn't say much. Dad would yell at a little bit every once in a while, but Mom caught herself one time in one of the meets that she'd chew gum, and she was getting to the point where she was just putting one stick after another. And by the time the third one of us, which I think was probably Pat, because he wrestled the heaviest weight at the time, she said that she had so much gum in her mouth that she about choked. And so it's those kinds of things. They wouldn't do anything to try to get an advantage over anybody else by going to Coach Sanger or going to Coach DeLeon. It was, hey man, these kids got to stand on their own and do their own thing. So I think that's what I really appreciated. And I look back and see that.
I thought they were great examples. Just about it was funny because my dad, I think he was probably about 55 before he bought his first pair of running shoes. He would always walk around our house and in his wingtips. That's how he'd get his workouts. And just the way he would be specific about what he'd eat in the morning. He'd always have his oatmeal. Healthy eating was big, and I think that impacted us. And then I always remember my mom would like to go over and stand over by the brackets, and she'd always like to listen to what kids would say if they had like Pat in the bracket. She always got a kick out of that.
I'm going to tell a story quick. I don't remember if I've said it on another podcast, but in my research for the book, I came across Dwayne Meyer. Dwayne was deaf, and he wrestled for the Iowa School of the Deaf in Council Bluffs, I believe, but his family lived in Britt, is from Britt. And he wrestled at state, again, not for Britt, but for the School of the Deaf. And he qualified for the World Deaf Games in Germany, I believe. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly. I wrote about it, it's in the book, but if I mess it up, it's in the book. And your dad was one of the main people that helped raise like $4,000 so that Dwayne, a kid like from Britt but not in the school, could go to this tournament in Germany. And can't remember, maybe I was talking to Pat on the phone about it once. I can't remember exactly. I've been talking to a lot of people, but they're like, oh, that was just one of many things that your folks did for people in the community and for the school. So I wanted to throw that out there. I don't remember Paul real well, just, a couple of run-ins, on Main Street or whatever at the school. I was a lot younger, but just everyone I've talked to, it's all, very giving, very generous, very helpful to the community. So.
And actually, Dan, it wasn't me, because that's the first time I'm hearing that story.
Okay, so it wasn't you. I was talking to someone else, maybe.
I got to say one more thing about Mom, because it resonated when Bob Finsky was talking, and it's something you have said also about Bob in the past, and that's when you were with them, they made you feel like you were the most important person in the world, and that was Mom to me. She, 9 kids, but I think, well, of course I was her favorite, but I think we would all say that same thing, that she made you feel special and like she was zeroed in talking to you. And that was something I think is really unique about her, but it just resonated because, again, you have said it a few times, and then I believe it was Spensky said it on their podcast.
I was that talking about that Meyer kid. I remember DeLeon brought him out to our house to work out with Jeff, right? Weren't you in about 8th grade? And I always remember sneaking down and watching him go at it, and it was real fun watching that.
Yeah, so I remember when he was training for that tournament in Germany. I guess I forgot it was in Germany, but yeah, we probably worked out a whole summer. It might have been 3-4 days a week that he would come out, but it was great for me. I mean, it also taught me a lot. Just even wrestling wise, it's just different techniques, and so I enjoyed it.
Anything else about your folks before we move on to some wrestling?
Well, real quick on so every year we went on vacations. It was somewhere all across the country. I mean, we'd pile into, we have an RV or we had a big van, whatever it was, we'd pile in and we'd take off and go. One year we went to Washington, D.C. and did the whole, White House, the Washington Monument, all those types of things. And like the first night we were there, we had an RV and we stayed in this park, this city park in Washington, D.C. And it was legally to park there. But at about probably midnight or so, after everybody kind of settled down and we were kind of going to bed, we get this knock on the door. And it was these two big Washington, D.C. cops, and said, and talked to my dad. I was right there with him. And he said, sir, I don't think you want to park here overnight. This is not a good area, especially for somebody from out of town, because there's a lot of bad things that go on around here. And Dad said, I think I'll be okay. And the cop said, well, do you have any protection of any sort? So he looks around and he says, yep, I got my fire extinguisher right here. I'll be fine. And it's like, talk about Britt, Iowa. I mean, just,
I think he had a hammer with him too that he was going to use. So
yeah,
it was felt just better.
Yep. When you think back about it, it's just like the trust and naivety of where we grew up is just so awesome. It just shows us who we all are.
Did you guys stay there that night, or did you end up?
We did.
Yeah.
No, we stayed right there. He wasn't going to move.
You go there and see 9 kids, and they're probably like, "Yeah, I'm not bothering."
Right, I'm not touching these guys.
That's probably with the babysitter that time, though. I don't remember that one.
And that old man has a hammer and a fire extinguisher.
Yeah,
that was probably mid-70s.
Yeah, I mean, I bet I was 10-ish. Yeah.
Speaking of 9 kids, your sisters, where are they these days? What are they up to? I don't think I know any of them personally.
Yeah, 2 are in Ankeny, Christy and Connie, and Karen's in Elgona. She's the oldest.
Okay. Nice. So we're all 9. I'm guessing not. I'm guessing all 9 of you weren't at the house at the same time. I'm guessing one of you was graduated, or was there a time period where there was all 9?
There's 8 years between Mark and Karen.
It's 16. Yes, I graduated in 96, and she was like in what,
79.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there would have been a point, a couple of years, that Karen was like maybe junior, senior in high school, and Mark was on the other end.
Yeah.
1, 2, or whatever.
It's mainly when I was growing up, Steve and Christy, because Steve's 6 years older, Christy's 2 years older. So that's what I remember the most.
How many bedrooms are in that house? How'd you guys handle that? Like room sharing, and who slept in the hallway?
There was a lot of
there's a lot of creativity. But another thing that I want to bring up, it's they taught us to be very independent, almost to a fault, because when we would the way you would go to tournaments when you were a kid, like we all had checkbooks, and we do our duties around the house, and you'd get a little bit of money to deposit into your account. So he taught us the value of $1. But I remember we would get dropped off at the front door, and you would go into that school and you would write a check out for the entry fee, and you'd go back to weigh in, and then you'd come back out and you'd go out for breakfast. And that was, I remember doing that in like 3rd and 4th grade. It was funny. I was just talking to Hagen. Hagen was like, hey, can you show me how to write out a check? He's in 7th grade and he doesn't know how to write out a check. But little things like that, I think they did those for a reason. They wanted us to be independent.
All right. Well, let's jump into some wrestling here. Obviously, that's what we're here to talk about as well. Let's start with the North Iowa Conference tournament. You all wrestled in the NIC tournaments. Now it's the top of Iowa. It's no longer the North Iowa Conference. You want to combine 10 conference championships, 1 runner-up, 2 third-place finishes, and 2 fourth-place finishes. Jeff, you won titles in 83 and 84. Tim won one in 83. Pat won all 4 years, 85, 86, 87, 88. Mike won one in 86, and Steve won two in 88 and 89. Mark was a runner-up in 96. As a team, though, we never won a team title, any of you guys. It was we won the first 5, I believe, as a program in the mid 70s, and then it was Osage for like, I think they got like 24 in a row or something like that, and we were second pretty much every year. Talk about the North Iowa Conference, because for a long time the North Iowa area, North Central Iowa, was known for its wrestling. It's probably from the 50s all the way through the 90s, and there's still some good teams. What was it like competing in the NIC and winning those titles?
Thank you, Pat and Jeff. There's all the titles. No, it was tough, man. It was, it didn't, of course, Osage always had tough kids. That goes without saying. But shoot, there was good kids from, heck, there'd be a good kid from Garner one year. There'd be a good kid from Buffalo Center even one year when they were down pretty significantly. Shoot, Lake Mills always had good kids. So it was just a tough tournament and a good one, because it was usually towards the end of the year. And so it was a good precursor to sectionals and districts and that kind of thing. So got us great experience and another tough tournament. So yeah, always real tough.
Yeah, I always, the conference tournament, I always looked at it as a part of the state series. Your conference and then a sectional district state. And I carried that into my coaching career, even that also. We had in the former league that we were in, had 10 schools, and there was a vote for various reasons to move the league tournament back a week, and which to me would make it out of sync with the sectionals with the state series. And I was a lone vote that voted against moving it. Again, I always thought it was really important. I think that the host schools, I can remember Osage hosted one time when I was coming through. We hosted one time. It was always an important event. And I think the Osage thing, I really think that Osage is a little bit responsible for the success we had as a program, because we were chasing them and they were. I don't remember Al ever putting pressure on us or ever specifically mentioning Osage. We got to beat them kind of thing, but it was always great dual meets and great conference tournaments.
Thing I liked about it was that it was similar to what your football schedule was, because the football schedule is so much different now, and you're not going to face a lot of those same teams necessarily at your conference tournament, but you'd compete against those same teams in football, and then you would get to wrestle with them at the end of close to the end of the season. That's one thing that I liked about it. But it was a tough conference, just like it is now.
It was really tough. It was a good mix of 1A and 2A schools. So you maybe didn't see them in sectional district, some of those same schools, but it was a nice competition throughout the year. And then the conference meet towards the end was really, really good for you to get you ready for state and tournament time.
I think.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say that I think one of the years, it was a pretty top heavy conference, with Osage and us, and then a lot of good individuals from the other teams. But I think one of those years, if I remember right, we beat them in the dual meet, or it was real close. I can't remember exactly how it turned out. I'll have to have my fact checkers. Todd Byers, our fact checker, would be able to figure it. He'd be able to give us the answer for that. So
he's probably texting you right now.
He probably is, yeah. But anyway, we certainly had some success there, I think.
I was just going to say before that, we've been recording for over 20 minutes now. I was just thinking, ready, go, harass each other. Just starting with North Iowa Conference, how much smack talking was there between the brothers? Oh, I got this many, you got that match. Was there any? I mean, there's no way there wasn't any trash talking between brothers. So what are some of the things you guys talk about?
Well, I can tell you, Dan. Me and Mike drove home from practice every day for 2 years, 3 years, I don't think we spoke one word to each other.
I sat in the middle. It was a bench seat. Sit in the middle.
So
God,
it
it
was
was awesome.
kind of the opposite of smack talking, I guess. But no, to me, it was always, especially like my freshman year when Jeff and Mike were both in the lineup as well. I can remember getting, really like into their matches. There might have not have been palling around or off the mat or whatever in those days, but boy, I really felt like I was out on the mat. And gosh, I can remember just so vividly at the Claremont tournament when Mike was wrestling Keith Freeze from West Des Moines Valley, returning state champ, I believe, and Mike was up on him with seconds left, and Keith Freeze did just a desperation lat drop, and Mike's elbow just got blown up, and I can still see it, again, those things. I think wrestling is that kind of a sport too, where you're training with those people and the brother thing, but yeah, I don't remember any smack talking for sure.
Gotta be something.
I say we really didn't have any like trash talking or even fighting each other. There really wasn't any of that. I mean, even when we were young or in high school, I probably thought I'd get beat up too much, so we didn't do much of that at all.
Yeah, I think it was chasing the one ahead of us. It's Tim kind of set that standard, when he finally broke through and and placed at state. And so I think, that kind of lit a fire under, some of us the younger ones to chase him and to do better than him. It wasn't necessarily that we were gonna, smack talk him, because he would have smacked us. So I think it was a good thing. I can't imagine not having an older brother that had the success that mine did, because I'm like, okay, they did it, so I can do it. But again, I don't think I could have blazed that trail like they did. So I was following them, man. I was following them.
Yeah, and I would agree. I never felt any, of course I was the oldest, and so it was, it really wasn't that hard for me to, just go to the backyard and win a battle. But there was really never any jealousy between us at all. We all wanted the other one to do better than us. I mean, I really always felt that way. So I just I hate to not be able to come up with a story here, but it was really I mean, it was really more of you're motivated by what they've accomplished. And you feel like, I want to be at least as good as that person. So
To me, that's the Britt West Hancock way. I've mentioned this in other podcasts. I've been around people down here who went to a school, that was not as successful as we have been and everything. And they were mad. I was talking to a guy once. I'm like, why are you so mad? And he goes, our high school football team, when I was in school, made it to the quarterfinals. That's the farthest we've ever made it. And we're so proud that we were the team to make it that far. They just made it to the semifinals. I'm like, why are you upset about that? And he's like, well, we wanted to be the team that always made it the farthest. I'm like, so you're rooting against your hometown school? Like, we want every year to be better. All these championships we're winning, all these guys, going to state. And it's like, why would you root against your people, your hometown doing well? But to me, that's, not surprising at all. If you guys, it was more just wanting to top the next guy and do even better and continue that legacy. So definitely. Sectionals. Starting in 1983, the 82-83 season, you guys, one Koele brother won a sectional title every year from 83 through 1990, and then Mark got one 6 years later. So let me run through this list here for sectional champions. Jeff in 83, Tim in 83, Jeff in 84, Jeff in 85, Pat in 85, Mike in 86, Pat in 86, Pat in 87, Pat in 88, Steve in 89, Steve in 90. And then, like I said, 6 years later, Mark got one in 96. What was it like for you guys going to a sectional tournament? That's the first round of the, path to state. especially, you know, midway through when you got, especially like Pat, couple brothers in, you guys had a reputation. You guys were known in the area. What was that like competing at that postseason level, knowing that, you know, you're gonna go out there and do what you do?
I think kind of,
Really prepared us well. And just getting you in the mindset that you needed to. You'd always say that you gotta write down before you go to bed, your goals and those kind of things. So I think he just had us in the right mindset.
Yeah, for sure. I think I still somewhere have the audio tape that Coach Al made of the relaxation tape. And that was probably part of, what started about sectionals time. But I also think that, it's been mentioned way back to the John Weiland episode on how that Jeff senior class, 84, right, Jeff?
85 was the
85.
senior class, yeah.
So that, that 80, I guess, 4 football season, that's, I guess,
Yes.
where that's kind of pointed at as when the modern era of the build towards what Britt West Hancock is, where that started. And I really think, Jeff was part of that in the wrestling program. And, and I can remember watching, Todd Byers and Tim down at State their senior year. And I mean, it's like, we were watching, some professional athletes or something. It was a big, big deal. And, I think Jeff with breaking through, I think the last state champion before Jeff was
By Dwayne Cook.
Dwayne Cook, probably.
Yeah. Yep.
Close to 10 years or so. And I think that I know doesn't quite answer your question there, Dan, but just the whole, building towards that and batten down the hatches a little bit started at that sectional time.
And I guess for me, it'd be that same way of that sectional term is just really what starts that, what Pat had talked about. I remember going down to the state tournament with Dad and watching guys like Dwayne Cook. And, as a little kid, that's what you want to do. You want to get down there. So, it all starts at the sectional tournament, because if you don't do well there, you're not going to be going down. So, not to put any more pressure on yourself, but that was just the time that you really had to produce. And so that's what the sectional tournament was all about. At least for me, it was.
Yeah, my experience. Sorry, go ahead. You're good, Tim.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
My experience is a lot different than your guys's too. I didn't make it out of sectional my first 3 years. So coming my senior year, that was kind of this is it, So I just think, people write their goals down, if you're at a job, have those goals, because if, you're a senior year and haven't made it through, there's still a chance, I think. And that's kind of where I was. And because my junior year, I beat the kid like 2 or 3 times and he beat me first round. So that was it. And that kind of sucked that year. So my senior year is my last chance. And I wish I had a couple more of those, but I was glad what I had, I guess.
Yeah, and I like, from my perspective, it's interesting, Dan, you originally asked, how it felt being, the people who knew you and there was some history behind you. I was always sort of the guy that nobody knew. There was no family connection between the Kelly last name and Britt while I was going through school. And so it always seemed to me, strange when somebody eventually said, oh, they knew who you were because of your last name. You always felt like, well, everybody in Britt knows you. You know everybody in Britt. It's really no big deal to do any of this stuff. But then all of a sudden it starts, other people start hearing it and talking about it. And that's what, to me, I think was always strange. And it just felt odd to have that happen. Yeah.
Were there any close calls for you guys in sectionals? Like, who was it? I was like, how did you win a state championship and not win a sectional? And then you're like, no, I did. And then I looked back at my notes and, oh, there it is. I just overlooked it. Was it Mike, I think?
Yeah.
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 Like, I felt like an idiot, but
No, that's all right.
Stuff it's all intertwined at this point.
When was that? Your senior year?
Yeah. I was looking at the notes and I overlooked. I'm like, did he not win a sectional? Did he get runner up and then end up winning state? And he goes, no, I did. I looked back and went, oh, it's literally right there. I just didn't pay much attention to my notes, apparently. Were there any close calls, though? Years you guys went to state, were there any years where you almost didn't make it out of sectionals? Do you remember, or was it mostly pretty obvious you were going to get through pretty easy?
I don't. I mean, this is moving it forward just a little bit. But my senior year, my junior year, I had qualified for state, didn't place. Of course, in my mind, I, should have. But then my senior year, my first match at state was against a guy that beat me earlier in the year, and I knew in my mind that if I didn't win that match, I was never going to place. That was my last shot at it. And so that match, it was against John McGovern from Riceville, and he was, he had been at 155 the year before, a weight up from me, and then came down because his brother had been at 145. So, but I went into overtime with him, first round of state, and beat him in overtime. And had I not won that match, I was not placing. And that, to me, I sit back and think that, man, that could have gone either way. And I just the thrill of being on that stand never would have happened. But other than that, I didn't really have anything else that was that close.
I always remember when Jeff, and this is like saying fast forward, and what was it, 8 year, junior year when you won the title? What did you do your semifinal match? Did you tear something?
Yeah, there was something that I think it's more cartilage that I torn my knee and a little bit of ligament damage, but it was kind of one of those things that I really didn't realize it till after the match. And, at that time you had to make weight, and I was, cutting a lot of weight that year. So I had to go and put the plastic sauna suit on and run around the basement of Vets Auditorium and end up making weight. But then after I got done, I was like, holy crap, the knee started swelling up. And so, yeah, it got to be a little rough that night.
Yeah, because I remember you came out in the finals and your whole leg was just, you couldn't hardly move. And,
well, that's one of those, Al DeLeon, greatest guy ever. But that night, I'm going to bed, and he literally gets a 50-gallon garbage bag, filled it up with snow. And he's like, here, put this on your knee and just sleep on it all night. I was like, okay. But about 4:00 that morning, I get up in the bed, the whole mattress just saturated. I mean, I got water all over me. And I mean, I couldn't sleep anything after that. But I was just like, are you sure that's what I was supposed to do? And he's like, yeah. So he just pointed at this other bed. So I went and laid this other bed for a few hours, but somehow it worked. So Al had the magic touch.
You had frostbite.
Yeah, I know it, because it covered my whole leg, and then part of my hip too.
And that was the last year you were allowed to stay at that hotel. They didn't appreciate the soaking wet mattress, probably.
Yeah, and that probably was the last year.
That was quite a high-end hotel, though.
Oh yeah.
I think they shut it down after that.
I bet they did.
Like, that was our last mattress, our last good one. It's gone.
Yep. That was quite a place.
Yeah. Was that the place? I think I saw a picture. Didn't they have a sign up and it would always say like "Welcome Britt Wrestlers"? Didn't they kind of highlight you guys being there?
Yeah, it was the Archer Inn. And it was literally one of these old school 1950 one-level hotels that had about 10 or 12 rooms. You pulled up from the parking lot, you pulled right up to your room, and you just walked in the door. And it was it was real old school. But it was, Al's whole idea was to get us away from the noise. I mean, you had all your people that you knew from other towns and stuff that were down there. We're all staying at the Radisson and whatever the high-end hotels were at the time. And you always felt kind of jealous that, we had to stay at the Archer. But Al's whole idea there was to keep us away from, the chaos and the noise. It's kind of like it was a business trip. And that was a smart thing. I mean, he knew what he was doing.
And when Tim says old school, it was old school in 1983.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. And we always had the same rooms every year. So if you did something to the room, like I think if I remember right, we spilled some water on the TV and it changed the color of everything and you couldn't hardly see it. The next year we had the same room, and guess what? We had the same color issue with the TV. So I think we wore out our welcome.
There was colored TV back then. Is that what
Yeah, there was. I'm old, but not that old.
Just kidding.
That was what was great about Coach Al, is he always had those little neat little things that he did. Staying at those hotels. I remember when me and Pat were going through, he would bottle up Britt water. So whenever we would go to tournaments, you could only drink water from Britt. And that was before bottled water was around. So there'd be jugs of Britt water at all of our tournaments.
I'd never heard that one before. It's stuff that doesn't make the newspaper.
There you go.
Yeah.
Another little sort of on that same topic. You're going to have Jack Fisher on here. I wonder if he remembers this. It would have been my freshman year. We must have been the first session on that Thursday morning. So Al felt that we needed to get down there Wednesday night, and I believe that the school was only going to allow us to leave Thursday morning. I think that was the controversy. So we loaded up in Al's personal car and snuck down there Wednesday night. I don't know if you remember that, Jeff.
Oh, I remember that. Yes.
He also put up he was so confident you were going to win the state title. He already had your picture up there. I remember him saying that he had your state title picture up, like when you walk down
by the library.
Yeah, he already had that there. Isn't that cool?
It's a good thing I won then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he'd have to sneak in there and get that taken care of. I know this is getting off track, but God, there was a funny story about, it was Pat. When Pat was a junior, we got second in state duels and I believe second in individual, right? Pat, is that correct?
We were third in duels, and second in the traditional. But yeah, okay. I know exactly the story that you're going to tell.
So as you walk into the school, there used to be like a shelf, and then I think the secretary would sit behind there, and they had the two trophies sitting there. And the way the trophies were, you'd have two wrestlers facing each other, and then the year that they won the state title. Well, I don't know if it was, I'm not going to throw anybody out, but it was probably Pat and Don and Ron and somebody else. They would change the direction of the wrestlers so they were chasing each other. And then they changed the date on it. And boy, that was hot, wasn't it?
I am putting that squarely on Don.
God, how funny is that? 1938. I know, I don't know what it was.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of Coach DeLeon, let's just stay here, and then we'll get to like districts and state here in a little bit. Coach DeLeon stories, what he meant to you guys, anything funny besides what we've already talked about. Talk about Coach and Lois too, because you can't talk one without the other. We all know that. What else can you say about Coach DeLeon?
I had a unique situation. I wrestled for him and I coached with him. And truly, if it wasn't for Lois, he'd be looking for his car in the Osage parking lot. I mean, they were such a great combination. They helped each other out on the wrestling side, and even before track wrestling, Lois would be just like my dad. He'd be following through and making sure the scores were correct. And then she also, she was in charge of, like, they called them the mat maids. And my sister Karen was a mat maid back in the day. And they would keep team stats, and they would help with any type of pep rallies and all that kind of stuff. And so Lois had a lot to do with that.
And for me, Al was that kind of guy, though, that would do anything for you. If you were somebody that worked hard and you wanted to get better, he would find a way. I mean, I remember as a 6th or 7th grader just telling Al, that's just when weightlifting just kind of started getting popular. I said, I need a weight bench. And so I met him at his house, and just out of 2x4s and some 2x6s, he makes this weight bench for me. Then of course when he gets done, he had these metal stencils, and he's pounding out there on it, and he's writing on there, made by the stud Al DeLeon and Jeff Kelly.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I guess for me, I just to reiterate his dedication and Lois's. When I was a freshman, I was cutting a lot of weight, and I had to, the mornings of weigh-ins, I had to go in and try to lose some extra pounds, and he had just like finished off his basement or something, and had this bathroom in his basement that shot heat out of the ceiling. And he put his exercise bike in that bathroom, just a little bathroom. And shoot, I'd be in there at 5 o'clock in the morning of weigh-ins. And of course I'm interrupting Lois, and she's trying to chase three little kids around the house. So I just but Coach Al had somebody that needed to make weight, and that was a sacrifice he was willing to take to for somebody on his team. So it was awesome. It was the both of them incredible.
As a teacher in 2023, when I hear high school student goes to coach's hot basement bathroom with an exercise bike, there's a school board meeting coming up about, there's a special board, it's just a different time, different era, and just I love hearing those stories. That's fun.
You're not a kid.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, our parents, the support. I mean, shoot, that's it was a two-way street. Dad and Al, working together to make sure that I could, they could put me in position anyway to try to be successful. First off, try to make weight. So it was a great thing. We were really, really lucky with what we all six of us grew up in, but also what the Britt West Hancock community had with Coach Al. No question.
Coach Al was an amazing motivator. You believed everything he said. I mean, if that guy would have been in sales, he'd have been a millionaire. But he picked the right career and helped kids and other people out. But just amazing how whatever he said, you just bought into. And it was an amazing experience, to be honest with you. There's a lot of programs now that they have out there that you sit and listen to them and you think, gosh, this is what Big Al was doing 40 years ago. And just on his own mind was figuring this stuff out. He didn't study it, he just knew what was right.
Well, he was an innovator too. Think about, he comes up with that book. He writes a book, I think in 1978. He put out that technique book, I believe, and that was ahead of his time. And just the way that he would demonstrate the moves. But to echo on Jeff, I remember, coaching with him at Waldorf, and there'd be these kids that on the team that, Coach Al would be in a meeting doing something, real important. And, one of the wrestlers would come in and need his assistance, and he'd totally drop everything he was doing and make sure that kid's needs were being met. So that was huge. He was a great teacher too. From that perspective.
Yeah, I think we were very fortunate with the parents we had, and we weren't maybe the type of the kids that needed that father figure kind of thing. But boy, Al was, and him and Lois together were just such a model, of what a married couple are, and he just did so much for us that really, I kind of the closest thing to non-family family, he really was. And just so fortunate to have had him as we were growing up.
Yeah, I just had him for 3 years of high school. He's such a motivator, like Tim was saying. I mean, I just really respected him. He could really get you ready to win, to believe you could do it too. Even if you weren't the strongest or the fastest guy, he always got you to believe you could do it.
And I've heard in so many of these podcasts between Coach DeLeon and Coach Sanger, father figure, like he was a father figure to us. And the crazy thing to me is most of the guys who were saying that had good dads at home. It was
Mhm.
just the Britt West Hancock community lived and still lives by that it takes a village mentality. So it wasn't just he was in replace of, the father you wished you had or you didn't have any at all. It was like literally, it was a lot of good two-parent home families. It was just that's the type of people you guys and we had in our upbringing at the school. So it was more than just, replacing someone who wasn't there. It was just, no, they just were good people who always helping everybody. So I wanted to point that out a little bit too.
One other thing too, I always thought it was important to bounce things off of him. Like even when I was at Iowa State, I would always look up Coach Al and just ask his perspective on things because I wanted his angle on things. And I being a coach myself at the college level, I don't feel like a lot of kids do have that relationship with their high school coaches. But we were so fortunate, not just with Coach Al, but with Coach Bob too. It's amazing, the male figures that we had growing up. It was incredible.
You have to add Coach Timmerman, Mr. Grant,
Yeah.
a bunch of those guys in there.
Perkins.
Falls, yep.
Yep.
Perkins, just you name it. So yeah, let's move into districts here real quick. 9 district titles between you guys. 84 was Jeff, 85 Jeff, Pat in 85, Mike in 86, Pat 86, 87, 88, Steven 89 and 90. Again, 9 district titles. That obviously you go to state from districts. Any good district tournament stories that you guys can think of? Again, any close calls or controversies that either got you there or maybe didn't, or anything like that you can think of?
Well, I can
Remember go ahead, Pat.
probably my most vivid one is districts in North Springs, my senior year. That would have been your sophomore year, right, Steve?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So and the place was just packed, and there were several college coaches. I remember Eddie Bannock was there, but I just remember Steve had. I mean, they're very tough weight classes, of course, but he got beat in the. Would it have been the true second match?
Yeah, it was a true second. Yep.
Yeah, and I just, it's one of those things where you don't know, expect to react a certain way, when an event happens, somebody passes away or something. You don't know how you're going to take that, how you're going to. But I can remember, I just lost it. I just fell apart. And I can remember which college. It might have been Jim Gibbons was there, and I couldn't. I couldn't. I had to just go in the locker room and I just was bawling. I could not. Just the fact that he didn't qualify, and I knew he was deserving of that. And I just kind of felt like he was going to be at state with the group that was going, and that was really, really hard on me. And again, I can't. It was genuine. I just was crushed.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a rough day. Oof. Yeah. That's the beauty of high school athletics, and especially wrestling. It's such an emotional ride. And it was tough. But I remember my senior year, my first match. It's great when you walk into a gym and you gotta jump over people to get to your mat. But I remember, God, I got really, really tired in that first period. And then you get tired and you get scared almost. And it's like, holy crap, am I going to get through this match? And it's almost like you kind of put it on survival mode. That's one thing I do remember about that first round of my senior year of high school districts.
I'll try to bring the group up a little bit. The thing that I remember, I think, from districts, and it would have been my senior year, and it was also in North Springs. I think that again, like Pat said, the place is just absolutely. I mean, you can't hardly shoehorn another body in the gymnasium. But I remember afterwards, when the place was kind of clearing out, and talking to mom and dad and so on. And I remember there was a group of Brit people that came up and was talking to us, before I went off and hit the showers. And it was a group of, there was a couple of them that, they may have had a kid in high school, daughter, son, I don't know, and they may have had a son that wrestled in elementary or something like that, but they really didn't have a connection to that exact team. But they were there, and it was again, it kind of goes back to what Tim was saying a little while ago, about the people from Britt, well, now Britt Kanawha with West Hancock. Man, they come out and support, and it's awesome. Even though they don't necessarily have somebody on that team, man, you're from West Hancock, they're going to come out and support you. And I think that's crazy. It's stuck with me all these years, but I still remember that from 1986. So it's awesome. It's awesome community support.
Still
Hey,
to this
Steve.
day.
Steve, were you wrestling 119 that year, that your sophomore year?
No, I was 145.
Your sophomore year?
Correct.
Okay.
145. Freshman year, I was 119.
Okay. Because I remember after one of the districts.
Oh,
You know,
yeah. It just got ballooned up.
There's a story. Yeah. So Britt was in the maid qualified for the state duels, which was 1 week after the state traditional tournament. And Steve was done a little bit week before that or whatever. And I know that Jeff, Mike, and I came home from college to come back and watch. And I think we were coming back to watch Pat and Steve wrestle in the duels, which would have been on a Saturday. And so we came home, and on a Friday night, so we're enjoying Britt on Friday night, and
Keep it PG, Tim.
I'm trying to keep it PG. So we were enjoying ourselves throughout the night, and it suddenly got to become about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I guess that means it's time to go home. So we did. We got in the car and headed back to mom and dad's house about 3 in the morning. Well, on our way home, we're driving along and we see this person out running. You kind of laugh and look at this guy out running. Well, as we get closer, we realize that it's Steve. And so we stop, we get out, we cheer him on, we give him some words of encouragement. We ran with him a little ways and all that. Finally had a discussion with him and realized that it's 3 in the morning. He has to weigh in at like 7 or 8. And he's overweight. He was like a 119 pounder, and he was going to be wrestling 138, like at the state duels, and he still had to work out and run to make weight. And so then we let him go, and to kind of make this circle full from what I was talking about mom earlier. So then we get back in the car and we drive the rest of the way home, and we're stumbling into the house, laughing and talking and whatever. And guess who's there to meet us at the door? Mom. She's like, what's going on? And wants to hear the whole story on how much fun we had and what was going on. And so we sat up for half an hour, raided a refrigerator, and just sat and chatted with her about all the fun things we did that night, and talked about Steve and how he wrestled at 119, but he had to go run in the middle of the night to make 138, I think it was, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a Timism story.
Yeah, no, and also Tim, you got to say now, to say that you were encouraging him along and running with him, don't picture this like Rocky scene or something. This was like Comedy Central.
Yeah. And I think
I had
broken
sunglasses upside down.
Yeah, I think I had some sunglasses that probably got run over by a car a couple times that I was trying to wear. And Steve wasn't, he was okay with it, but he was a little annoyed, I think. Even as a sophomore and we were these old guys, I think he was a little annoyed with us.
But yeah, that was the first year of state duels. And it was really cool because how was it? Pat won it at one height the week before. Pat won it at 167. Don won it at 185. No,
Steve,
Benny won it at 67 for AGWSR, Ackley. Don
Pat won
won it
heavyweight.
at 85. Pat won it at heavyweight. And how did that work? You went because you wrestled the Lisbon kid.
Yeah. So
Don let you wrestle him, or did you guys argue about it?
a little bit, because so the scenario was I was at heavyweight, Don was at 185, and the Lisbon kid, Greg Buttress, was at 167. Well,
Benny
he
beat him.
went up to 185. I came down. Don went up to heavyweight. And the real argument was, though, there was a kid in our third place match from Griswold that was the super heavyweight state champion, and I wanted to wrestle him. And Don said, "No, I went. Yeah, I'm wrestling it." So that was yeah.
Yeah,
That was the first year of dual state, 1987.
Yeah, Buttress, man, he was a two-time junior college national champ. I think he win Fargo, or no, is it UNI? He did well.
Yeah, Chelsvig won the weight, and Buttress got second in Fargo.
Yeah.
Or,
Wow.
That was in Cedar Falls, but
Right, yeah. The old Fargo was at Cedar Falls.
Let's get into some. Oh, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that's good stuff. It's fun.
So there was some harassing, just maybe the hobnob had something to do with it. Beforehand. So yeah.
Rooster,
The Red Rooster.
back in the Red Rooster days.
Yeah. Oh, best salad bar for like $5. I remember when I was. I had Mark's Pizza at my fingertips, but I always wanted
There
to
you go.
Rooster and get chicken strips and salad bar. So
Good stuff.
yeah.
hey, before I forget, I have a Mark's Pizza story.
Go for it.
So we, over Christmas, when we were all home, that's what we would do, and we'd order these stack of 10 pizzas or whatever. And well, it was my job, I guess, to go get them or something. And I got looking, and your dad, I'm pretty sure this was when your dad still had it. He had it decorated with Britt paraphernalia, jerseys and things hanging. Does that sound about right, Mark or Dan?
I honestly don't remember. I just remember the movie posters. That's kind of where my memories start, when we got the movie store in.
Okay, well, I saw this singlet hanging up there, and it had 155 on the leg. And I got thinking, I said, that's Mike. That's a singlet that Mike wore in the state finals that year. So I asked him if I could have that singlet. So again, it's been so long ago, but they got a ladder out. I climbed up the ladder, took that singlet down, and wrapped it up as a Christmas present and gave it to Mike that year.
It's funny. I don't remember the sports stuff. I was born in '86, and I kind of remember like '92 when we got the movie store is kind of my first recollection of the place.
Wow.
Yeah. Mark's Pizza. I miss that place. It's been 20 years since they sold it, but it's still doing well.
Yep, that's good stuff.
Titanium lunchbox. I ate lunch with Kevin Sanger once last year now, and it was pretty good. So yeah, doing a good thing. Let's get to state wrestling here. Tim, you qualified in '82, went 1-2. Jeff in '83 went 1-2, didn't place. Tim became the first Kelly to place at a state meet in '83. You went 3-2 and took 5th place at 145 pounds. Like you were saying, you're the one who kind of started it. And then the next guys, was it kind of like, okay, he's got a medal. Now it's time for, keep it going. Was that kind of the mindset for some of you guys following Tim?
Oh, absolutely.
For
You
sure.
see that success,
Yep.
you wanna duplicate that as well.
Yep. And Mike made his first appearance at state in '84, lost back then. You lose your first match, you're done. I don't remember what year they changed that to you can have to lose twice, but it can be a one and done trip to Des Moines. And then Jeff in '84 and '85, you won back-to-back state championships. And in that same year, Pat made it as a freshman at 167 pounds, but he lost his first match. Let's go back though a little bit, talk about Jeff's 2 titles. Jeff, what was that like for you, going 8-0 at state those 2 years after going 1-2 in '83?
it was just something, even after that sophomore year, I really thought I was capable of placing and being good, and I thought I was good enough to place, and I didn't. And I think it kind of goes back to you had Bob Steenley on, several months ago, and he just said, something about sometimes you have to embrace the bad things that happen to you in life. And to me, that was one of those bad things that, I really felt like I should have placed, I didn't. But that was a motivating factor that then said, all right, well then you got to do something about it. So, so I felt I worked even harder, and it was just always a goal that I had. But it was also one of those things that where you don't ever do those things alone, and that, I credit, my brother Tim a lot, just from what, the example that he made. And then other, wrestlers, like Todd Byers was in that class. He used to work out with him a lot. Chris Fisher was in there my year. He's a very good football player, good wrestler as well. Jeff Byers and Dan Potts. Dan Potts was a guy that, myself and Mike and the other brothers, we'd go to wrestling tournaments all the times with Dan. And even Dan wrestled with us at Iowa State. So it was just, I guess for me, winning those two, yeah, it's a great accomplishment. But at the same time, there's a lot of other people that helped along the way.
The title matches you won, again, right in this book, it all blurs together right now. If I don't have it in front of me, it's hard to keep track of what happened when. How close were your two title matches that won you the titles?
Actually very close. The first one, I think the score was maybe 7-2 or something, but it was right at the end. The guy tried a desperate throw, and I got probably 5 points out of it. It was like a 1-point match all the way till the end. Guy from Algona that I'd wrestled once during the year, and there were close matches. And a senior year was actually pretty close too. So I wasn't really somebody that beat people really bad. It was just I was a little more conservative, and I guess for me the main thing at the state tournament was winning. I didn't care so much about how bad I beat them.
Pat, you were a freshman the second time Jeff won his title. You were one and done. What was it like wrestling at state as a freshman?
I think you can't really prepare for that environment of vets, now Wells Fargo, but you think you're ready and you think you're prepared, but it is a very, I mean, people were almost literally like on top of you because the stands were so close to the mat. You don't get that type of environment anywhere but there. So that the kid was certainly better than me. I don't think I could have beat him, but that it was just almost a surreal kind of match, as I recall. And you talk about the one and done thing. It was I don't know who invented this, but I think it's the dumbest thing ever. The pull through where you guy had to make the finals in order for you to come back, and they did that even in the NCAA Division I tournament back in those days. Yeah, so it was one and done because he got beat, I believe, next round.
And I remember, I think you talked about that on a previous podcast. So you might have to wait around for 2 days for the possibility of wrestling back, and then it wouldn't happen. How did they expect schools to logistically plan for that? Get another hotel room that night, and then, oh, by the way, the guy lost,
Yeah, you had mentioned that, and that never dawned on me that would be a scenario. But yeah, what if you had one qualifier, came down there, got beat, and you're waiting around all that time? Yeah, I don't understand why that was ever a thing.
Yeah. Mike, we go back to 84 here. You lost. You were a one and done in 84 at 132. 85, I'm assuming, is that when you messed up your elbow earlier in the season, so you didn't get a wrestle at the end of that season. Then you came back in 86 and won your state championship at 155 pounds. Talk about your title.
Oh, I guess back to that 84 year. That was Jeff and I were the only two that qualified, and so I had to my guy that I got beat by first match. He was in the semifinals, so I had to hold my weight down until he was done, and so he ended up getting beat in the semifinals. And then Jeff ended up course, winning the semifinals because he ended up winning the championship. So it was awesome experience for me being down there, and a great thing to see, just to kind of see the whole process, because I knew the next year I was going to do it. And so unfortunately, as I guess looking through, mom kept, I think, the other five would agree with this. She did an incredible job of scrapbooks, and so we've got scrapbooks, tubs of them. And so I was looking through them over the weekend, and gosh, I look back to that 1985 wrestling season, and I think how close we were to probably having one of the best teams that the school has ever put out. I mean, it was really that close. It's kind of equal to when Tim was a junior in football. I know a lot of people talk about that. What was it, the 81 football season? Is that what? Yeah, the 81 football season. And so that was a really, really good one that never even qualified for state because of the qualifications back then. But I look at that 85 season, and gosh, we had, injuries. We had some really uncharacteristic losses, and we still, Jeff, and there was one other guy, Randy Lammer, he was fourth, and we still finished sixth at state that year. So if we would have had the 4 or 5 other guys that should have been there, shoot, we could have possibly brought home a trophy and possibly even the gold one. So that was a little frustrating. But then my senior year, we really put things together pretty decently. We had a really good room. There was, at that time, there was, the two Finch boys ended up being state champs. Don was a state champ that year, and of course Pat won 2 titles and a third placer. And then there were some other kids that were in that room that ended up placing as they went along in their years too. So we just had a really good room, really good workout partners. Worked very, very hard, and it was a lot of fun.
How'd your title match go? Was it close, blowout? What do you remember
It
from
was,
that?
yep, nope, it was very close. I wrestled a kid that was at the time, he had put on a little weight overnight, let's just say. But big, strong kid. I'd wrestled him in freestyle the summer before. But just a real strong, good kid. And ended up winning right at the end, but ended up winning.
Uh, Time for some It's Pat now, the old SNL. Pat, you had 3 straight, you went to state all 4 years, but next on the list here, you in 86, you got third at 167, and then at heavyweight in 87 and 88, you won your 2 titles. What can you say about your experiences at state and winning those 2 championships?
Yeah, I think, one thing I remember sophomore year was I was in a weight class with a guy from Coon Rapids, John Corey, who ended up wrestling Nebraska for a while. But that was, kind of had my sights set on him, and he was really good, and majored me in the quarters, I believe it was. But and actually, Brian Benning was in that weight class. I believe he was in the bracket, same bracket. But what maybe more importantly, or more what stood out was my first round match. And it was against a kid, I believe, from Milford. But my goodness, that was, one of the most strenuous matches I've ever been through. And I can't even think of the kid's name. I'll have to look it up sometime, because it was a 10-10 overtime, and I believe it went to referee's decision they had back then. And I just, squeaked by that. And, so I wouldn't have placed that year had I gotten beat in that match, because, he would have likely would have gotten beat by Corey, the next round or so. So that sophomore year, that's a big memory. But I do remember after the Corey loss, it was very freeing. There was just a weight lifted from my shoulders, and I wrestled really well on the backside then, on my route to third. Another thing I remember, and I shared this at Al's memorial, just, a little story about who Al was. I had put a lot of time and effort in, through off season of my freshman year and on into to the sophomore year, and I really felt that I had things going in the right direction. And again, this 15-year-old mind, you don't see yourself in the rankings. The Des Moines Register would put the rankings out every week or whatever during the season. And, I talked to my kids during my coaching years, till I was blue in the face about, don't look at rankings. They don't mean anything. They're worth the paper that they're written on, kind of thing. Well, it did affect me that I didn't see myself in the rankings. And after practice one day, Coach Al could tell that I was a little down and just kind of acting kind of, out of sorts. And he kind of, what's going on here? And I told him, I said, I really felt like I deserved to be in the rankings, and I'm not. And so the very next rankings, I'm ranked third. And, that's just an Al thing. He called the Des Moines Register, I'm sure, and, pled his case. And, next thing you know, I'm in the rankings. So that was something, a few memories there from my sophomore year.
What about your 2 titles? Talk about your championship matches and winning those 2 titles. Matching
well, I guess one thing is I started the season out. So as a freshman, I was an undersized 167 pounder because Jeff was at 155. That was probably the weight that I would have been at. But I wasn't going to even attempt to challenge him. So I was up at 167. And then sophomore year, I was probably a right-sized, if not a little bit big, 167 pounder. By my junior year, I had grown and was I don't want to go into the horror stories about what I'd have to do to make weight. I don't know if there's a statute of limitations to some of this stuff. You're talking about the school board, but I think somebody'd be in trouble over this. And I got to the point where and the coaches didn't even really know everything I was doing. I wasn't doing anything dumb, like throwing up or anything. I wasn't doing anything like that. But just the time I was spending, the miles I was running to make weight, even the morning of weigh-ins. And it was one weigh-in after Christmas. I just came to Coach Al, Coach Bream, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. So mid-season there, I bumped up to heavyweight, and so I really only wrestled, less than half of the season at heavyweight. The rest of the season was at 167. So it was a little bit of I didn't really know the landscape of heavyweight at the time. It took a few matches. I can remember I wrestled a couple of really good guys in my first matches at heavyweight. So it took a little bit of adjusting just to the body size and the strength, and a little bit unexpected of how I would do. I think it really became an advantage being a smaller heavyweight. And going into my senior year, probably, maybe in retrospect, maybe I can't remember what the dynamics of the team were at the time. I remember Greg Byers would have been probably the 85 pounder. So maybe that's why, because I knew he was a good wrestler. Maybe that's why I stayed at heavyweight and didn't go at 185. I'm not sure, but I wrestled Mashik from Don Bosco, and I wrestled him in the finals my junior year, and then saw him again my senior year at that Claremont tournament. It was a good tournament, and then again in the state finals senior year. So I think that I think there was probably senior year, quite a bit of pressure, and definitely self-induced. So it was just more of a relief to get it over with. I do remember my cousin Jim Kelly lived in the Des Moines area, and he introduced me somehow. This might have been my sophomore year even to an usher at Vets named Chester, and Chester was probably, oh gosh, mid 70s probably, or more maybe even, and I remember talking to him between rounds. Each year I would spend a lot of time just sitting talking to Chester between rounds, and just for some downtime, and that was kind of a neat memory as well.
I've been doing this podcast for a while, and one thing Brit people are terrible at is talking about themselves when they do really well. I've asked three of you about your 5 championships, and you did everything but talk about your championships. We talked about a 75-year-old usher more than your championship match. So, Brit people are very humble if you haven't noticed in this podcast. Listen to any of these. So, and to me, I wouldn't want it any other way. I've tried to pry information out of people for 75 episodes, and sometimes it's just I need to resign myself to the fact that pretty humble people. We don't have a lot of arrogance, even with all the success that we've had over the years. So I'm not one bit surprised. So moving on to Steve here. With that being said, Steve, you made it in '89 and '90. You were a one and done in '89 at 145, and then your senior year in 1990, you went 4-1, placed third. And I just saw something on the Pin Doctors yesterday, I believe, about your wrapping up your knee, that article. Talk about that a little bit in your time at state.
Okay. First off, I remember when Pat went up to heavyweight, and I don't know if he told me or probably didn't tell me this, but I remember he ran 22 miles. Didn't you run 22 miles to make weight for the Lake Mills duel?
I can't remember exactly, and but I mean I remember I had kind of a route that I would it was 6 miles before I left home, and then sometimes it was 6 more in town then when yeah, I again not worth a reaction, but yeah, it was not easy.
But I remember you said you made it 2 different sports. That's what one thing you told Al is I can't make it 2 different. It's not weight cutting. I'm not out for weight cutting. I'm out for wrestling. But that was horrible because you would eat. I'd be in the basement sleeping, and I was cutting weight. I didn't know how to cut weight as a freshman, and he'd be up there making food and banging on the pans. And man, that was awful because he could eat all this crap, and then on the weigh-ins to driving into weigh-ins, he'd be eating something right in front of me. I couldn't beat him up because he was 3 times the size of me that I wanted to. And then the other thing about Jeff, I remember probably DeLeon gave him this just old beat up takedown dummy, and it just had 2 legs and hooks, and he hung that up. And I remember he would drill on that constantly. He'd hang it up underneath our deck, and you'd always knew when he was working out because you'd hear it swinging, and he'd be drilling his takedowns on that thing. Nothing fancy, but something that he did constantly. How many times do you think you hit that dummy takedown wise, to make you a state champ?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was, and that was one of those things, I guess, Dan had asked about even that, going from that sophomore year losing when I thought was going to do a lot better. I guess that was part of that motivation. I knew I had to do something, whatever that something was. That was one of those things, that Al DeLeon thing is kind of like, we're not using this dummy much. Can I take it home? Absolutely. You could have it. Whereas, yeah, that's another thing. Nowadays, they would never let you take a piece of equipment home and use it. But
right. But no, it was great memories. It was fun and exciting, and it's tough to go down there and not achieve your goals. But good support at home, and folks are always proud, and so that made it an easier thing to deal with. But I remember in the weight room, like on that Monday, talking to Coach Bob about the state experience, and it was tough that I thought I'll never say that I was a state champ. That's one thing that bothered me, and it's not because my brothers were, but DeLeon put those goals out in front of you, and he would make you believe that you could be. So then when you fall short, it hurts. That's
Talk about
probably
the thing
my main memory.
Talk about the thing taping up the rosary or something in your knee or
Oh
something.
yeah. Yeah, it was a little medallion, and I don't know, it's just something that gave me that confidence that my leg was going to be protected when I was wrestling, because I heard it like the second to last game in football, and then a week later I had the ACL surgery done, So that was probably mid-October or end of October, something like that. And but it was I was worried about my leg getting hurt. So that was just the thing that I used to get me mentally prepared to be able to compete. And one thing that I remember is I had to do a lot of swimming to get in shape because I couldn't wrestle. And it was kind of neat because my mom would always go with me to swim because I always had to have a supervisor. So we'd always go to the grade school. And, about 5 a.m, me and my mom would go and I'd get my laps in and she'd kind of float around the pool. And, but I bet that was the best shape I've ever been in my life, even through college, because those swim workouts were just the best.
Can anyone else smell that swimming pool when he
Oh my
mentioned
gosh. I think about all the times when you're at kids were outside for recess and they'd be yelling down through that vent when you'd be
That could look terrible in there. Yeah.
And Mark, last but not least, I'm sure as the youngest, you're used to, waiting somewhat patiently.
Yeah.
5 older brothers went to state, placed at state, won state championships. You're kind of at the end of the DeLeon era. You were the beginning of Terry Heeman taking over for Coach Al.
Yeah.
Did you feel pressure to make it to state so you could say all 6 brothers did? Did you not think about that? What was that kind of like for you?
Yeah, I thought about it quite a bit actually, and like my parents, like we talked about earlier, they didn't really put pressure on us necessarily. And DeLeon was such a great motivator. And Justin, his youngest son, youngest in his family, he graduated 2 years before I did. So I knew that era was going to end at some point. And it did my junior year. So he was there my freshman through junior year. And Terry Heeman came in and he was great. He was a lot different style, but he wasn't green coming in. We kept the same coaches. We had Ron Finch and Billy, so that part stayed the same. But he knew DeLeon. He came from Emmitsburg, I believe. He coached in Algona, another town, Southwest Iowa. Can't think of the town. Ida Grove, maybe Battle Creek. That's where he came from. So he had some. He wasn't just green coming in. So I'd never been to state. So I was like, as my last year, getting there and being the only one on the team to make it was pretty cool. But also I wanted to have some teammates with me. But I got beat the first round by the eventual state champ. And back then too, you had to wrestle the second round. My mind was kind of beat. So I got beat then. I was done that Thursday night. And it was pretty tough. I mean, I wanted to stay in the stands. I didn't know necessarily if I'd be a state champ, but I wanted to be on those stands and do the grand march. Watching you guys on the grand march was really cool. It's almost like your hair stands up on your neck when you see those kids come out there. My mom and dad really liked that too. And I didn't get my chance, but that's okay too.
I'm just curious, in the history of Iowa wrestling, is there another family where as many from that same family made it to state? 6, that's quite a bit. So I'd be curious to know if there were more than 6 in any given family that had brothers qualify for state, let alone have the success you guys did. So 33-13 overall record at state between the 6 of you. Like we already said, all 6 of you made it at least once in 14 total appearances. And those 5 state titles. If you made it to the state finals and your last name was Kelly, you weren't losing. You guys went 5-0 in title matches. 2/3, a 5th as well. Going back to our original question about, going into like a sectional meet with the last name Kelly. You guys have been out of high school for a while, some more than others. Your name is still linked in, very much with the Britt West Hancock tradition. What's that mean to you guys in 2023 to be the Kelly brothers that wrestled for Britt West Hancock?
I think it's neat that we all wrestled for Coach Al and played football for Bob. I think that's real cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really more about being from Britt, to be honest with you, than it's kind of cool the name is linked to Britt, but just just growing up in the environment we did, you know, the Britt West Hancock world is second to none. I mean, it really is. I mean, I would not want any other thing than to have grown up the way I did or we all did. Just it's best thing that could have happened.
No, I agree. And also, you know, shout out to our sisters too. You know, I know Dan, you mentioned them at the beginning, but they also had to take a lot of wrath. You know, there was a lot of opponents that didn't wish that we would win, and they would communicate that to them. Christy, you know, she got spat on twice at the state tournament, you know, so they had to endure a lot. So we appreciate all their support over the years, because man, we sure couldn't do it without them either. You know, I mean, that goes without saying. So I think I definitely want to give a shout out to Karen County and Christy. So we're your number one fans.
Yeah.
Definitely second that, Mike. Yeah, for sure. And again, kind of what Tim was saying, the whole Britt West Hancock thing, and Dan, I just can't say it enough. You know, what these podcasts have meant, because there's especially pockets like when I was in college that I missed what was going on, you know, with the sports scene, and then the people that you pulled up, you know, and I had no idea about some of these, and just outstanding athletes. And I remember having a conversation at the Hall of Fame game. You know, we were playing Garner last year with Wayne Croneman, and just it just, you know, to absorb it all is just amazing that there's a town 10 miles away from us that pales in comparison to the successes and athletic program that we've had at West Hancock. And you know, for it's just, you can't, there's not a recipe for that. I don't, you know, it's just amazing what you know, that they've done over the years, and the people involved, you know, the Take a Village thing, just really has a lot of meaning with that. But it's just, I think the pride is more in, yes, with the family, but also just the Britt West Hancock environment.
And I think, you know, a lot of that name recognition now, you know, with Steve's sons going through high school and Kennedy, that's certainly brought, like, you know, Cole did very well, was third in the state tournament, and Creighton's doing very well now. So I think that's probably more of the legacy there with the success that his kids have had. I doubt there's really anybody that remembers who I am or anything. It's probably more of Steve's kids that Kelly named now.
And I still think Kennedy would have been a heck of a wrestler if girls wrestling had been around just a few years sooner. I was going to say, with your sisters, could any of them have held their own on the mat back in the day?
Actually, they're pretty tough. Yes.
Yeah, they are tough.
Al DeLeon always talks about when Justin comes home from school. I think he was in 4th grade, and he goes, "Dad, I'm the second fastest and the second toughest." And he goes, "Well, Justin, who's the toughest?" "Christy Kelly." That's how he responds. But no, yeah, what Jeff says about the podcast, I couldn't believe how accomplished Dick Govig. I mean, you know, growing up, you're like, we really had an Iowa national champ from Britt High School. And so then I Googled him, and he's incredibly successful in his business side too. And wow, that's interesting that we've had those type of people walk through the doors of the high school.
Yeah. I got to throw something out about Dick. I've spent a decent amount of time talking to him since I was setting up the podcast, and I'm the chair of the Hall of Fame. And his son, Todd, who's now the CEO of that company out in Arizona, after I called Dick and told him he's one of our next inductees into the Britt West Hancock Hall of Fame, he was so thrilled about it. But then his son called me and he goes, "Do you have a date yet for the Hall of Fame?" And I said, "We're waiting. It's going to be the first home football game date, and we still don't have schedules for that yet out." And he goes, "Okay," because in the 3 weeks since you had originally talked to him and set up that podcast, well, for 30 years prior, he mentioned stuff from Britt High School maybe 4 times. And in the last 3 weeks, he has mentioned something every single day. He's so excited and proud of it. And he goes, when you find out that date of that game, you let me know because we're going to try to get him up there for it. And this is like a guy's 90 years old. He lives in Arizona, and he's so excited to come back for this quick little, halftime introduction and a 45-minute late night induction ceremony. And to me, it's just a cool thing to think about. Of it still means that much to someone from that long ago, and people don't know the guy because he hasn't been around for how many years, how many decades. So yeah, sorry to get off track.
Yeah, I had no idea the success he had, and it was very interesting listening to him talk.
I got to ask this question now. I asked the Sanger brothers the same thing. Who was the best wrestler out of the six Kellys? None of you are going to say it was yourself because that's not how Brit people are. But if you had to go, start.
It was Jeff.
I was gonna say I would vote for Pat. Pat and Steve were both All-Americans in college. That's something I think in college I would have given my left arm for. But yeah, Pat was 2-time All-American. Steve was a finalist in junior college. So I would say probably Pat, then Steve.
Yeah.
I would,
Yeah.
I'd vote Jeff, D1 national qualifier, but more than that, again, go back to that 83 football. I think that, he was part of that movement that built Britt West Hancock what it is today. Best athlete, though, I would say Tim.
Oh yeah,
By far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
I remember you could bat left and right. I remember watching your games in high school in baseball. Like, how does he do that?
A good track and track, baseball, football. When he had a touchdown, a punt return, and a kickoff return in one football game one year.
No.
Who, with maybe the help of the Red Rooster, would have won, if you're all together, who would have won a match between any combination? I mean, who was the one that would have gone undefeated in a round robin tournament of the Kelly brothers after a Friday night at the Rooster?
Probably Tim.
Probably Tim.
I don't know. I would say right now, Steve probably
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
For
Just
sure.
because
Yeah.
he's been at it, he's younger. He'd probably be okay, but I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if Pat would wear him down too. That was pretty aggressive. He had a motor to him as well, but
I know I couldn't win in a sprint. Holy smokes.
probably
I
not.
can't even run.
Probably not. Boy, that's interesting to think about though, when you stop and, because like as an example, Mike, again, it's speculative, but as a junior, Mike probably would have been a state champ. I would say. I mean, he was ahead of the 3A guy that won state. He was ahead of him 10 points with 10 seconds left and ends up, dislocating his elbow. So he ends up having to forfeit out of the match, or medical forfeit out of the match. And that kid goes on to win state. The chances are that he probably would have. So it really easily could have been, Mike having 2 titles also. But I don't know. That's such a tough question because there's just a lot of variables. So yeah, I don't know. It's a tough question.
Who would have the hardest time cutting weight right now if you had to?
There's no way. No way.
I'm pretty thin.
I have a lot to lose.
I don't think I could lose any more weight. I'm pretty thin.
No. Well, I think at this point, again, I'm very thankful you guys have come on. I'm going to do one more quick plug for the book that you guys are going to be very much featured in. On West Hancock, history of Britt and West Hancock football and wrestling programs. The wrestling portion is actually going to be a bigger portion than the football. Never realized how wordy you have to be able to describe so many wrestling matches and duels and championships. And it just, like you said, going back to Dick Govic, blew my mind how much history Britt West Hancock Wrestling has. It's mind blowing. So if you want to buy one of these books, let me know. Send me a message on Facebook. Shoot me an email. Real excited to get that out there this summer, and have a lot of copies yet to sell. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and buy one. Next up on the podcast, I have the 1981 Boys State Championship Golf Team. After that, the 96 Girls State Championship Track Team. Eric Koele and Vance Hagen are going to do an episode that should be interesting. Jack Fisher, like Pat mentioned earlier, and then I'm doing one with a handful of middle school teachers from when I was in middle school over in Kanawha. So thanks for enjoying the podcast, everyone. Those are the upcoming episodes. Make sure you buy a book. Like always, guys, I know we kind of go in order, we get out of order, whatever. So if there's something we missed or you haven't been able to talk about yet, any last minute things or shout outs that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, when you
Dan,
talk,
I'd like to. Well, I was just to say, Dan, I just really appreciate what you do for Britt and for the podcast. I think I love listening to these, and so I just really appreciate everything you've done.
Thanks.
It's great to see all my brothers tonight too.
How
Yeah.
often do you guys get together in person? How often does that happen?
Once or
Not
twice
that
a year,
often.
It
probably.
happens.
It's funny because Jeff, I and Mike all live in Ankeny, but I got kids who are in activities and everything, and so Jeff and Mike, and we're just crossing paths, some days.
Yeah. A few times a year, but not enough.
Yeah,
What it amounts to.
exactly.
Yeah, I guess, Dan, I just want to say, thanks for what you're doing. And I've listened to all 74 episodes, and I'll listen to this one too, so I'll make it 75. But listen to Sangers. It was just such a. It was edutainment. You learn a lot, and it's entertaining, and
Yeah.
But all of them have been just terrific, and you got to give yourself a little pat on the back for I can't help but think that hopefully there's kids listening to this and being inspired and being connected with the past, reflecting on that past and celebrating our present and building the future kind of thing that's what's happening here, I think. And I've just been really, really grateful for what you're doing.
Well, I was at the school the other day getting stuff from Coach Sanger, and Kellen Smith, who I did a podcast with him and his brother and his dad and grandpa the other day, talked to him for a little bit, and I said, do any of the high school kids actually watch or listen to this? And he goes, actually, some do. And then I walked into Miss Troutman's room, a couple kids I heard someone say, I heard the word podcast got brought up. So I was like, oh, a couple of them maybe do. So it's just, to me, it's a labor of love, and it's fun. And I don't think this would be happening if I didn't go to a school like West Hancock. I don't think it's real common for people to care that much about where they came from, and we're pretty lucky to be from Britt, be from West Hancock. So, well, Kelly brothers, I appreciate all 6 of you guys. Couple of you, it's the first time I really met you in person, if you can call this in person, but in this day and age we'll count it. So I appreciate you guys. Again, 5 state championships, should have probably been 6 if Mike didn't get injured. A whole lot of state tournament appearances, a lot of medals, and just good overall people, and great parents and good upbringing. So thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening, and go Eagles.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.